Am I the only one who is shocked that October is already over? I feel like it just started. Not only October, but also the entirety of 2024. We have 2 months left. Why did nobody warn me? Anyways, betrayals aside, we are here today to wrap up my 2024 October reading. As always, we are going to start with the wonderful little statistics. In the month of October, I read 19 books. One of those was on my yearly TBR, and 2 of them were from my monthly TBR. For the format that I read them in, I read 1 library book, 3 on my Kindle, 10 from my physical TBR, and 5 audiobooks. Next, we'll talk about ratings. In October, I gave out 2 DNFs, 3 2 stars, 3 2.5 stars, 2 3 stars, 4 3.5 stars, 3 4 stars, and 2 5 stars. Overall, that gave me an average of 2.9 stars per book. And then last but not least, we will talk about the pages that I read in October. The shortest book I read was 43 pages, and the longest was 606. I read a total of 6,093 pages, which gave me an average of 320.68 pages per book. Now that the statistics are done, let's get into talking about each of the books I read this month. In this container here, I have every single book that I read in the month of October that I have the physical copies of. But y'all heard the statistics for this month. I read 19 books. So we got a lot of books to cover. So let's go ahead and get going. The first book we're going to talk about is The Blood Trader by Lynette Noni. I read the first 2 books in this trilogy, The Prison Healer and The Gilded Cage, back in September, and I absolutely ripped and raved over them in my September wrap-up. I know that I did. And while I can't really say anything about what happens in this book because it is, the final book in the trilogy, and I'm not doing any spoilers here, I loved this book. I actually read this as an audiobook, and the people who narrated it in the format that I read it, absolutely stunning. Thank you for existing. It is really crazy to me though that I read this book in October because this feels like months ago in my brain as far as my reading goes. It feels like forever ago. But I do still think about this book and this entire series to this day, which is why I ended up giving The Blood Trader a 5 out of 5 stars. I was borderline crying at the end of this book, and not because it's a sad ending, but because I was so sad to leave the world. This series is probably my favorite series thus far of 2024, and I don't know if there's anything that I'm going to be reading that's going to top it. I love this. Next up is a book I also forgot I read this month, which is going to be Wildwood. This is written by Colin Meloy and illustrated by Carson Ellis. I don't think I've done any talking about this book at all, and that's because it really wasn't that great. This is actually part of a trilogy, and I do have the other 2, and I have been carrying around this trilogy since I was in 5th, maybe 6th grade. And I mean, these books are chunky. This one, I think this one's 500 pages. Yeah, it's 530 pages, but oh my god. I actually sped read my way through this because I wasn't fully immersed in it. I kind of just wanted to know what it was about. And as far as a middle school grade book goes, I would have ate this up. I would have loved this when I was 12 or 13, but I just don't think that it hit for me at the ripe old age of 18, Nonetheless, let me give you a little blurb about it. In this book, we follow Prue. She goes into the Wildwood to try to save her little brother who is taken by a group of ravens. And literally nobody ever goes into these woods because they are apparently magical and have creatures and a whole other society behind the one that Prue lives in, And oddly enough, there is a lot of talk about politics in here, and there's a map of the wood, right? And while I know you can't see that super clearly because it's not super zoomed in, there's the Northwood and the Southwood and then the Wildwood and then the Avian Principality, I don't know. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that this has so much political magic in it that I was surprised there's 4 middle schoolers. Now, I did end up giving this book 2 stars, so I can't say that I enjoyed it, but looking at just the basic plot, I think I did enjoy it, It just doesn't live up to par for what I would be reading today. Anyways, moving on, let's talk about book number 3, which is going to be The Vengeance of the Pirate Queen by Trisha Levenseller. I tried to read this book in a video that I posted back in, I believe, September, where I was making progress in the series that I was in the middle of, and God, I didn't know it was in this girl's point of view, and it just didn't appeal to me. I actually ended up listening to this book as an audiobook, and I'm glad that I did because I don't think I would have sat through this book if I had to read it. In the first 2 books, we follow our main character Alosa's point of view, and I loved her 2 books, but in this one we follow Serinda. We follow Serinda on a mission, and I'm gonna be real with you, it kind of felt like Miss Levenseller here was trying to get a third book out of the series. Like, it really doesn't pertain to the plot that we were talking about in the first two. It could have been kept as a duology, and I personally think it should have been kept as a duology. Or, you know, write this book and make it like a spin-off of the duology, because this, you don't need to read this. This is like a completely different plot, same characters, but totally different, you know? I think that that is the main reason why this book only got 2.5 out of 5 stars for me. It really fell flat compared to the first two, and I loved the first two. I love the first two, but this one, I really don't have much more to say about it. It didn't hit, and I would skip it. Moving on to another series that I've been neglecting to move forward in, we have A Touch of Malice by Scarlett St. Clair. Me and Miss Scarlett St. Clair have an absolute love-hate relationship. I have read so many books by this author at this point that I really need to stop trying. But I picked up this series because I liked the premise of it, and I'm like, you know what, I'll give it a try. I loved the first book in this series, A Touch of Ruin. Absolutely stunning, loved it so much. The second one, can't remember the name, fell so flat for me, hate that book. So going into A Touch of Malice, I did not have high expectations. I didn't really know if I was even going to get through it. And I didn't. I think I read like 20% of this book, and then I quite literally could not do it anymore. I could not do it. At this point in the series, the characters low-key all pissed me off. They all pissed me off, none of them were redeemable, and to me, it just wasn't worth reading on. I didn't care enough. I just simply didn't care enough. I also feel like there really wasn't like a plot. It very much felt like we just pulled something out of nowhere and tried to make a story out of it. Like, I couldn't be asked to. And I cannot be asked to keep talking about it because it does make me a little bit mad. Just know that from this point out, if I ever say I want to read a Scarlett St. Clair book, somebody needs to stop me, because I have only liked one book from her. You want to know how many I've read? I read 5 of her books. I need to stop trying. I really need to stop trying. After reading 2 books I really didn't like, I wanted to pick up a book that I thought that I would like. So I ended up picking up Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. I still do not know how to say this author's last name, and it makes me mad because I made an entire video on reading this duology, and I still probably can't pronounce her last name correctly. Miss Rachel, so sorry. Nonetheless, Two Twisted Crowns. Let's talk about it. If you haven't seen the video of me reading this duology, I was really conflicted on my feelings at the end of One Dark Window. I felt a little bit confused. I kind of was just like, what's going on? Like, I don't know. I think I was in a weird reading mood at the time too, so I was just like not fully there, if that makes sense. And that kind of did persist for like the first 50 pages of Two Twisted Crowns. To be so honest though, I think I gave it a bad rap myself because I, brain-wise, wasn't there. You know, I really think it was a me issue, and I so strongly think that because looking back, I did enjoy this. I am still slightly confused by like end of book 1. Or not confused, just, I don't know. I still can't really describe it. I just wasn't there, honestly. Mentally wasn't there. Anyways, I ended up giving the Two Twisted Crowns 3.5 out of 5 stars. I love how many perspectives we get in this book. I love that our characters split into 2 parties and they did 2 separate things so I could know what characters were where. Oh my lord, that helped so much. Splitting them up into like the 2 groups that we had in this was the smartest decision an author has ever made. I will forever love that. Forever love that. I also really appreciate the fact that in this book, the romance did take a backseat compared to the plot, which I really think it needed to, and I'm really glad that it did. We did get a new romance too, though. It's like another subplot, so I'm glad we still had that romance subplot. I am a girly who loves a romance subplot in her fantasies, so. But on the topic of whether or not I would recommend this duology, I really think I would. I know that this one is recommended to be a beginning fantasy read, and it totally is. If you have never read a fantasy before, this duology might be for you. It's got like magic, it's got funny characters, it's wit. I don't know. I'm blanking. Just read it if you want to. Now, these next 2 books I don't actually have physical copies of, which is very sad, but we are going to talk about them anyways. The first one is The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. Oh, I don't know what compelled me to read a historical fiction, but I did. I read this, well, listen to it. I read this as an audiobook, and it really brought me back to my middle school days when all I would read was exclusively historical fiction. I was a really weird kid. I was obsessed with World War II and the Nazis in Germany and Jewish camps. I know that's so weird, okay? And I know it's so weird to say that I liked something that was so terrible in our history, but I think it just fascinated my little brain. And I say all that because this is the first historical fiction book that I have picked up since that phase when I was in like 6th grade. And I really truly think that this has opened up a whole new world of reading for me, and I'm gonna have to go back to my historical fiction phase. Hopefully I can branch out from Nazis in Germany, because otherwise that's gonna get some depressing reads. But a little backstory aside, let's talk about this book. In The Tattoos of Auschwitz, we follow the main character, who is the person in the Nazi camp who gives the people like their numbers, because people who came into these concentration camps were practically treated as inmates, so they all got a number on their wrist, and our main character is the guy who put them on. For the life of me, I cannot remember his name, so we're just gonna past that, but we follow him in this book, okay? And we follow him from the second that he gets into the camp to the second that he leaves, and I'm so glad that he had a somewhat happy ending. He ended up falling in love with someone in these prisons, and they reunited and started a family. Nonetheless, I really did enjoy The Tattoos of Auschwitz, and I think you should read it or listen to it. I think it was more compelling because I listened to it honestly, like a man was talking to me in my ears, you know? Maybe listen to it as an audiobook. Anyhow, second book that I do not have a physical copy of is going to be The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I picked this up directly after finishing The Tattoos of Auschwitz because I was looking for something more upbeat, and it said it was a witty romance, and I said sure, add it to cart, listen to it on Libby, and it went great. I binge read this book in an entire sitting, okay? I loved this book. After reading it, I went and looked at the reviews, and apparently Catherine Center is like a really well-loved author, and one of her other books that she's written was Hello Stranger. That one I currently have on my Libby shelf. I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm very excited to. Even though I did listen to this book as an audiobook, I absolutely love how Miss Catherine Center writes. I just love it. Because even though I wasn't reading the words in front of me, her descriptions are amazing. How the characters interact was absolutely beautiful. I truly think that someone needs to turn that book into a movie or a TV series, because I would watch it. And if somebody already has, please tell me, because I would like to watch it and consume it multiple times. Love the book so much. There were so many points where I was literally sitting, crocheting, and laughing out loud while listening to this book. Like, it is so funny, and the characters are so, they're so scrumptious. I love them so much. The only thing I will say is that at the end of the book, we get like this part that I feel like wasn't really necessary, which unfortunately is like the closing scene of the book, I guess, but I don't know. I felt like we didn't need to do that. I thought everything was going nice, and maybe we didn't need like that curveball, but who am I kidding? Maybe that was the whole point. It just occurred to me that I didn't really tell you what this book is about, other than the fact that it's a funny romance. Let's back up a little bit. In this book, we follow our female main character, who, once again, I cannot remember her name for the life of me, as she is assigned to be the bodyguard for a famous actor, I believe. It ends up turning into this whole thing where they end up doing like a fake dating trope so that his parents don't find out that he has a bodyguard, because he doesn't want to worry them because his mom has cancer. So, you know, it becomes this whole thing, but she ends up living with him and his family on their family farm for a while, and oh my god, I loved it. I won't say more than that because I don't want to spoil it, but I really, truly, 110% love The Bodyguard. And speaking of favorite romances, this right here is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Meyer, and this might be my favorite romantasy book I have ever read. I'm sure this book needs absolutely no introduction, but in here we follow Evie and Tristan. Evie, who is the assistant to the villain, and Tristan, who is the villain. Evie is low-key in love with Tristan, and Tristan don't really know it yet. And Tristan may or may not be in love with Evie. I don't know. You'll have to read the book to find out. But it is so... There's also a frog, this little guy right here. His name is Kingsley, and he communicates to people with signs, which is absolutely adorable. And while this book does heavily focus on romance, there's also a mission that Tristan and Evie are going on and trying to solve, like a little mystery. The mystery being that there is somebody on the inside of the castle, on the inside of this villain operation, who is feeding information to the outside. And of course, we cannot have that, so we have to figure out who it is. But I have yet to read the second book in this series, Apprentice to the Villain, and I need to. I really need to. I've been talking about doing it for so long. Like, I have plans to read the second one because I loved this book. I loved it. This is one of the first book talk books that has hype that I believe has been appropriately hyped because I liked it too. This is like the first one, right? And I love it. I'm so happy I read this. Next up, we are going back to those historical fiction roots I told you about to read The Bicycle Spy by Yona McDonough. Mikado? Yona Mikado, no. Okay, close enough. This is also a Nazi book, but this one is for 5th through 6th graders, just to give you an idea of how long I've been lugging it around. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. It really wasn't anything special, but once again, I was on the historical fiction kick apparently, and it fulfilled that little void in me. But in here we follow Marcel as he goes through school and finds out that he's friends with a Jew who's undercover in France because World War II has started to break out, and he ends up working with the resistance, like one of those resistance groups, by passing notes and loaves of bread to people to help his friend escape and find a safer place to live. But like I said, it's nothing like crazy fancy. It's still good, but it's definitely for 4th through 6th graders. If I didn't say it already, I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. And then next up, we have the second book that I DNF'd this month, which is going to be The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. I still don't know how to say the title. The Cloisters. I'm pretty dang sure it's Cloisters. But I was listening to this as an audiobook. I believe I got quite literally 40% of the way through it before I couldn't do it anymore, because it wasn't interesting. The whole premise of this book is that we follow Anne, who is in New York City, and she ends up finding like a spooky tarot card deck that's like magical or something like that. I wouldn't know because we were 40% of the way through the book, and we hadn't even like talked about tarot other than one time. And while I get that fantasies can be slow paced, this book is only 300 pages, which meant that I read 150 and nothing was happening, or about 150. And for me personally, that's not worth it. Even if I'm listening to it as an audiobook, it should not be going that slow. It really shouldn't, especially because this book is a standalone. No. I couldn't stand it, I couldn't do it, I didn't care enough, and all of the characters were kind of insufferable. Forgot to point that out, the characters are insufferable, they all complain, or they're all annoying. I DNF'd it. I hated it. But after reading that really bad book, I ended up picking another one that I've been lugging around since middle school, and that is going to be Counting to Perfect by Suzanne Lafleur. This book is actually really, really sweet. And here we follow Cassie, who's like 12, 13 years old, as she spends the summer trying to reconnect her relationship with her older sister. Her older sister actually ended up having a kid while she was still in high school, and because they live in what I'm thinking is a small town, she kind of got kicked in the what's that saying that has to do with a boot and being kicked? I don't know, she was just like ostracized, you know? But I think this book is really, really sweet. I actually related to Cassie on a level that I probably shouldn't because she's 12 years old and this book is for 12-year-olds. But nonetheless, I still think it was super duper sweet. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and oddly enough, I would recommend it. It's a really quick read. I think it was only like 200 pages. Yeah, literally 195 pages. And it's kind of heartwarming, but also kind of like heartbreaking at the same time. After reading this, I kind of realized that all the books from middle school have like 2 themes. It's either really high fantasy or really high emotional. I'm great at picking books in middle school. Next up, we have my library book read of the month, and that is going to be Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman. I still cannot pronounce her last name for the life of me, and that makes me so upset, but I did read her 5th book. Or technically, this is the 6th book I've read by her, because I read Radio Silence. Anyways, not the point. I am so in love with this volume, like, I ate it up. I am so happy that we kind of got back to the happy side of Heartstopper. I know that volume 4 was really depressing and talked about a lot of like really serious topics, and I'm glad that she took the time to do that. But honestly, I was reading Heartstopper for the romance, and I was ready to get back to the romance and continuing and seeing how their story progressed. So I'm very happy that we got to do that in this volume. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars because I really did love it. I love it so much. But I don't really think it held too much emotional value for me because all we really focused on this was the physical aspect of Charlie and Nick's relationship. And while reading it and looking back at it, it kind of got a little bit repetitive. So, you know, 3.5 out of 5. I still really enjoyed it and I love that series, but it's definitely not my favorite volume. Moving on, we are going to talk about a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, which is called Straw into Gold by Beth Anderson. This is a book I read on my Kindle at like 11 o'clock at night. It is literally 47 pages. Super easy in and out, and you know, it was there. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars because while I know that you can't really say a whole lot of words about characters when you're reading like 50 pages about them, I felt like every single character had no emotional depth. But I really did appreciate that in this retelling, the person who needs to spin straw is a guy, and the person who saves the guy is a fairy fae female who's actually like under the rule of an evil fairy fae. So that part was fun. Love when we gender bend a fairy tale. But moving on, let's talk about the first official book that I read off of my October 2024 TBR. Those of you who didn't know, I think I made myself a 5-book TBR for October, and obviously I only read 2. The first one of those being The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. I am a Crystal Sutherland girly. I read House of Hollow when I got back into reading about a year and a half ago at this point. And oh my gosh, I will never not love Crystal Sutherland, especially her horror books. I love Crystal Sutherland's horror books. In this one we follow 3 girls, one of which is a witch, and the other 2 who are in like this trio because they needed to get something from the witch. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil it, and I cannot be asked to read the back of this book because there's a lot of words, and I already read the book, so you know. You can find that out for yourself. But the way that Miss Sutherland connects these characters and makes like a really weird trio out of them is something that I will always, always love. She has such a way of bringing characters together and making those weird groups of people that just enthralls me. It thrills me, it's exciting, and I love it so much. There's also a whole bunch of plot twists at the end of this book that I was not thinking we were gonna get. Took me by surprise. And also hurt my soul. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I absolutely 100% recommend it. But if you're going to read it, please go into it with the mindset that there is dark magic and a lot of gore. Nonetheless, I truly 100% loved The Invocations, and if anybody knows any other books that give the same feel as this, please tell me. Moving on, I kind of went on an audiobook and Kindle bend here for a while, so we have a couple to talk about that I don't have physical copies of. The first of those is going to be The Ritual by Chantal Tessier. Oh my gosh, when I tell you this book took me forever to read, this book took me forever to read. This is the first book in the Lords series, and I really did enjoy it. I did. However, I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars, but I think that's because of the way that I read this book. This actually started off as a book club book, and because of that, I read like the first 20 chapters in a month, and then Ben read the rest of the book in like a week and a half. So I think that really affected how I comprehended the book and the connections that I formed with the characters. But I absolutely love this book, and I cannot wait to continue the series. I really don't even know how to divulge my thoughts on this book to you because I have so many of them. They're kind of conflicting, and the plot is very complex. However, what I can say is that this is absolutely a dark romance read. A dark mafia. Nah, I don't even know if it's mafia. I call it a cult, man. It totally could be a cult. I don't know what it's classified as, but I had a whole lot of fun with the cult aspect of it. Don't really know if it's a cult. It's never outright said that it's a cult. It's like a club, like an exclusive. It's gotta be a cult. It's gotta be a cult. I don't know, but I really did like it. If you are a dark romance girl, please try The Ritual. I know it's 606 pages. I didn't know that going in, but now you know. And you got this. The next book that I have is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I think it's been like 2 weeks since I read this book. Yeah, it's been 2 weeks since I read this book, and let's start off with the basics. I gave this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars, and I think I'm okay with that rating. This is a literary fiction read, so I can't really, I don't know. I ended up reading this book in a video, and I remember that I really could not form one coherent thought about this book, and I really don't think that I can still. This book is like so real and raw, and I don't want to say heart-wrenching, but like, I don't know. I really cannot talk about this book, and I don't know why. It's so silly that I can't talk about it, but this feels like how I felt at the end of One Dark Window, where I'm like, I don't know how I feel. No, do I? I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain the plot of this to you. Basic plot of this book is we follow Pearl and, I don't know, we'll go Pearl and Pearl's mom as they move into this new town that the town oddly reminds me of the movie Don't Worry, Darling. And they meet like this really rich family who is actually the people who are renting their apartment to them. And Pearl becomes attached to each and every one of them. And one of them becomes attached to Pearl's mom, and Pearl's mom is an artist. Like a really weird one, but a really good one. I don't know. I really think I would recommend this book, but I don't know if I really should be. I really cannot form a coherent thought about this book, so I do apologize for my rambling. This happened the last time I talked about it too, and it's definitely something. Final statement. That was definitely something. Next up, we have the last book that I have a physical copy of, and honestly, one of my reads I was most excited for this month, but it fell really flat for me. And that is going to be Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. I want to make it very clear before I say anything about this book. I knew what I was getting into. I knew it was a dark romance. I knew he was a stalker. I knew it had something to do with like predatory child bad rings of the world, and none of that really bothered me in this book. but there was something that did bother me. I have never read a dark romance before where the main characters have had a physical, intimate relationship with one of the characters saying blatantly no and it's still happening. And I think that because of that, I have found where I draw the line in my dark romances. I will read a lot of dark stuff. I will read dark academia. I will read mafia romances. I will read weird cult stuff. I mean, I literally read The Ritual, right? But in every single one of those books, and every single dark romance that I can recall that I have read, if the main female character says stop, the dude does. He's got a sense of basic respect. And while I guess it's kind of inconclusive in the beginning of this book, if she says no or if she says yes, I still feel like no. I feel no. That part aside, the end of the book and where their relationship left off and the side plot of what Zaid is doing left off, I am excited and a little bit scared to see where it goes. I will be finishing this duology because it is only a duology and I have the first one, but I have very strong feelings on this book, the beginning part of it anyway. But because of that, I ended up giving Haunting Adeline a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It really got chalked up to the whole consent conversation. It really did. I am a stickler for the consent conversation. And now we are on to our final read of October, which took me by surprise, and that is going to be I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This is the first memoir book that I have ever read that I can recall, and oh my gosh. I was never an iCarly kid growing up. I was never a Sam and Cat kid growing up. My family actually didn't have cable, so I was really into like How to Train Your Dragon movies and the Barbie movies. So while I wasn't really around that culture as a kid, I definitely watch those shows now or like see clips of it on TikTok and the like. And to read her story with such minimal ties to that world and seeing like open door, this is what it's really like, I was whoa. Now obviously I'm not dumb. I know that what happens behind the camera versus on the camera is very different, but seeing just how much like emotional turmoil and physical turmoil and mental turmoil and emotional turmoil and all the turmoils that she had to go through is kind of insane to me. I listened to this as an audiobook where she actually read it, and I think that really nailed in the coffin, you know? I've never thought about reading memoirs before because I'm like, well, why would I want to hear about somebody's life story? But the way that this one was told, and I don't know if this is true for all memoirs, but it felt like I was genuinely at times reading a fictional book. Right? And because of that, I think I was a little bit more open to the idea that I was reading a memoir. And clearly, I loved it because I ended up giving I'm Glad My Mom Died a 5 out of 5 stars. And I want to make it very clear that I did not rate this book based off the contents in the book. I rated it based off of what I got out of it, story-wise, about the person. I did not rate it based on how entertaining it was. I did not rate it based off the topics in the book. I did not rate it based off of if I liked, I don't know, like the pacing of it or not. I'm trying to say I didn't put a rating on her life and her story. I put a rating on my feelings about what I learned and how it was presented to me. Does that make sense? I'm very much validating what she went through, and I applaud that she went through it and is still here. Takes a lot out of a person, but my rating is separate from the person and the story. It's on the, you know, I hope I'm making sense. I really hope I'm making sense. But yeah, just like that, that is every single book that I read in the month of October. Looking back and talking about each and every one of these books, I low-key didn't realize I read all of this in October. I actually thought I was behind in my reading. I was not at all. This is actually my best reading month of 2024. 19 books is actually insane, and I don't know where I found the time or patience to do it, but thank you, me. I hope I get a really good November as well. But obviously, I have nothing more to say because I finished talking about my books. So with that, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you got some good new book recommendations, and as always, if you have any for me, let me know. And with that, I hope that your book worlds are treating you just as well as mine treat me, and I cannot wait to see you guys next Wednesday. Toodles!